Okay, sorry about that. It shut down everything, the recording and everything. So, um, okay, so here we were talking about taking your soil test, and we said you want to take your soil samples from two different depths. You want it from that 14-inch, and then again at your 6-inch or 8-inch depth, and then you kind of average those out on the amendments that are needed. Okay. This thing. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I got other things popping up there on me. Okay. So that's going to be one of your main differences in just doing a soil test for the lawn, or something like that. Because this is going to be a permanent crop. You're going to be putting trees there that are going to be there forever. So you really need to know at a depth what that parent soil composition is, and then what it is at a 6-inch depth. So drainage is going to be one of your most important factors. And that's something that we don't have. So again, that's a reason to start a year in advance. And what I will recommend to people is that they actually rip their rows. You can get a piece of equipment, maybe a plow or something like that, and rip the rows and get down to that 14 inches. And then when you do your amendments, you'll have the soil broken, and you can go ahead and put your amendments down there, maybe fill in with some compost, let that compost down for about 6 months, 6 to 8 months, and then you're probably ready to plant. You would need to soil test twice on that. So yes.
Areas where you
Mhm.
that soil thing there is
Not really. No. Because the soil can be naturally acidic, and it's going to show that at a 14-inch depth, where it probably wouldn't show it at an 8-inch depth. So, or it could be alkaline, one or the other. So, yeah, I can't hardly hear you.
Sorry.
Is it's what?
A newer soil.
A newer soil.
Like, 30 inches down.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. Okay. All right, but a well-drained soil is something that you're gonna need. That's why you would want to rip your soil, add your soil amendments, give it time to break down, give that, if you need lime, it's gonna take a long time for that chemical reaction to occur. If you have broom sedge, everybody know what broom sedge is? It's just a grass. It grows kind of wild here in Tennessee. If you have broom sedge, that's a sign that you've got acidic soil. So that might be a place, if on your property you got a lot of broom sedge, that might be a good place to plant for blueberries. And then, test that soil, see if it is acidic. And then rather than trying to change it, to make it alkaline, you could plant something that is more acidic, acid loving plant. So your stone fruits, peaches, cherries, and plums are most susceptible to poor drainage, and those are the ones we tend to see the most diseases on, unfortunately. There are apples are kind of intermediate, and pears can survive on a more poorly drained soil, but it doesn't have to be a really rich soil for fruits to thrive. I always tell people you want to keep them a little bit hungry, because a little bit hungry makes them think that, oh no, I'm going to die, so I've got to reproduce. And so that's why they put on flowers, and then they put on fruit, because they're reproductive stage. So organic matter, like I said, you're always going to have to add organic matter in Tennessee. And so you want to put that organic matter on there. Living organisms, just making sure that you've got, good worms and other microorganisms. If you have a really poorly drained soil or a poor soil, you can add some worms to it, add some compost, amend that soil and bring it back to life before you plant. So you can consult the soil map. But the soil survey online is much easier to read and to understand, I think, than the old books that we used to use. So that information is very valuable. It can tell you what your depth is to the groundwater, the depth to a hard pan, different things like that. And that's from years and years and years of surveys and gathering information, like our Soil Conservation Service and NRCS. They've been doing this for ages. And so all that information is put together and they know what soil is where all across the country, all across Tennessee too. And so that will give you kind of an idea, and it gives you an idea of what your slopes are on different places too. pH and fertility are pretty important factors. I would say pH, just like I said, your soil fertility, you can correct that with a fertilizer, or increasing the level of organic matter in the soil. Soil pH can be corrected, usually not a limiting factor unless the site is highly acidic. And then like I said, you may want to change your mind about where you're planting things. Fruit orchards do not need a highly fertile soil to be productive. The best soil, and we'd all love to have this, a well-drained loam, a clay loam about 3 to 4 foot deep. I don't think we have that around here. I've never found it. Well, maybe kind of in the river areas or down near a creek or something like that floods pretty often. Then you seem to have better soils. You get those the low-end soils. So good drainage should take preference over depth. Soil fertility should be medium to low. Normally fruit trees, you want about a 6.0 to 6.5 pH. And then of course our blueberries are going to be lower than that, about 4.8 to 5.5. So once you have selected a site, you've got to prepare it. So like I said, you may have to rip it or till it, till the row and then amend that whole area. And I like to do staggered plantings. I was out on a home visit the other day and, they had about 12 fruit trees, but they were all in a line, straight line. It makes it a little easier for the pollinators to go back and forth because they kind of zigzag around from tree to tree. So to get good pollination, you probably should do 2 rows of 6 and, do like 6 here. And then between each one, have another one about 20 foot away, As on standard trees, your spacing is going to be about 15 to 20 feet. If you go with the dwarf, semi-dwarf, you can plant them a little bit closer. But we'll go here. So taking a nematode test, we can do that through our lab. It's important before you put out any trees because you may need to fumigate the land if there are nematodes there, because nematodes will get on the roots of plants and they feed and they kill the roots, and then that of course will end up killing the tree. So nematode test is going to be one we would recommend. Again, take your soil samples and then picking out varieties should be up next. Well, before you plant, also examine the field for the presence of perennial weeds. Multiflora rose, thistle, poison ivy, black or hackberry. You don't want those in your field. And they should be treated. The only way you're really going to get those under control, you could do close mowing, but spraying with a herbicide is going to be the best way to get rid of them so it kills down to the roots. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
For the multiflora,
Mhm. Oh, probably the new version of Roundup, which does not have glyphosate in it anymore. Okay, this is another lesson which we needed to go over too. Roundup is not just glyphosate anymore. That was the active ingredient, and since Roundup or Monsanto has been sued so many times because of the issues with glyphosate, they have changed their active ingredient. So make sure you pay attention when you see the Roundup brand name. You're not just pulling that non-selective herbicide with glyphosate in it. It's going to have triclopyr. That is the non-selective herbicide or ingredient. trichlor is the non-selective herbicide in there, or active ingredient. And then it can have dicamba, and it can also have 2,4-D, which are broadleaf weed killers. And this has been going on for about 2 years now. And I'm surprised we haven't had more accidents, with the use of Roundup on lawns and for edging and things like that, because it did not used to have the dicamba and the 2,4-D in it. So honestly, by taking out the glyphosate, which had little to no residual in the soil, they have put ingredients that have residual, they tend to drift, cause damage and things like that. So the glyphosate was safer, I think, than what is out there now. So, and it can be very confusing when you go out to buy, because everybody thinks Roundup, they just think glyphosate. It's not glyphosate anymore. It's got other ingredients in it. So just be aware of that.
That's correct, you know.
You just need a non-selective herbicide. The trichlor would be fine. If you can find that active ingredient, you just want to kill everything without worrying about the drift and such like that. Just do the trichlor, or where it says kills the grass or kills the weeds, not the grass. You don't want it to have 2,4-D or dicamba in it, because in the heat it will volatilize or rise, and it'll go do damage to trees and plants and vegetables and such like that. So be careful about where you're spot treating with Roundup. So, but on those fields, like if you had the blackberry on there, I would just bush hog them as much as you can, and then wait for that new growth to come back, and then spray with your herbicide. And don't really recommend the vinegar, Epsom salts, and dish soap. Vinegar is an acid. And so when it gets down in the soil, it actually kills more of the earthworms and the microorganisms than glyphosate or other herbicides have done in the past. So it can cause more damage. Yeah, I wouldn't mind, you could probably use the vinegar on, maybe a driveway where you've got Bermuda grass coming in, that'd kind of set it back a little bit. But if you actually get it on the soil, it's going to kill those microorganisms that we want in there. So weed control is tough. It's a lot of hand removal, spot spraying. I mean, like we got, like I said, with the hackberry or the Bradford pears gone wild. Once they get to a certain height, you can do the slash and spray, and you're just spraying that plant itself. You're not spraying the whole field. So you may have to get a backpack sprayer where you're going out and you're doing a little slash with a knife or pruning shears, and then immediately spraying that slash with a herbicide. So, and then it will kill the whole tree down to the roots. So I don't like using herbicides, but they are a management tool that is out there. And if they're used correctly and safely, you shouldn't have a problem with your own health. Because you do want to use the proper, the PPE protective equipment, a mask, especially if you know that you're kind of sensitive to these things. You might want to use a mask while you're spraying, gloves, full shoes. One of the worst things I hate to see is somebody out there, with a spray, and they're out there in their shorts and their flip flops and they're spraying. Or what really aggravates me is when they're doing this. Okay, what are you doing? You're rocking in it. Okay. Well, it was a long time ago. You spray backwards. Look behind you every now and then so you don't fall in the hole. But, yes. But yeah, it's the way that you're applying it, your protective equipment and stuff like that. But yes.
You're not wanting to use chemicals.
Mhm.
You're saying don't use the vinegar, salt, dish soap thing. What else can you use? It's not
There's
bad for the soil.
there's not very many options other than culturally removing, mowing, hand removal. You can take the stumps and you can put manure on the stumps to help them break down faster, because the Bradford pears or the calorie pears will come back really quick from the roots. So you can actually put fresh manure on there. That's a nitrogen source, and it helps the roots to break, or the stump and the roots to break down. So, but probably I'd have to look up to see what would be, flamethrowers for weed control. Flaming them will control them for a little while, and then they'll start coming back. You definitely want to do that when the weeds are small, but just culturally staying on it. Don't let those the weeds go to seed. Keep them mowed or weed eated or bush hogged, things like that. So the way you set out your plants, your between the rows are going to kind of depend on the size of your equipment, so that you can get it in and out between the trees to mow. So okay. So yeah, non-chemical controls, tillage, planting cover crops, build up that soil structure, but keep the ground covered. I like, at least for the first couple of years after you've planted your fruit trees, make sure that you're mulching them. If you're going to put in an irrigation system, you can use like a weed barrier fabric, but you need to have that irrigation running underneath that so that you can water the trees, because that weed barrier is going to be a barrier. And then you put mulch on top of that, and that will help control the weeds, but you want to make sure that they're getting water, adequate water. And then, like I said, I couldn't think of the right tool a while ago, running a deep shake, and that will break up the hard pan, and that will allow you to get down to your 14-inch depth to where you can pull soil samples at 14 inches and then 8 inches. Average those out. Okay. Yeah, that's not working. Well, things just don't want to work for me tonight. Okay, so cover cropping is one of the most beneficial things that you can do to help control weeds in your orchard. And there's fall cover crops and there are spring cover crops. So if you were going to put out cover crops, you probably should have had them out already. You're at a very short window at this point, and you'll have reduced germination because of the cooler weather, and we have gotten a couple freezes. So if you haven't gotten them out yet, man, do it this weekend. It's supposed to warm up just a little bit. So but you still can plant the cereal rye. You have a little bit later planting date on it. Your clovers you can plant now up until spring. And so those mixes are really good. I think we've talked about that a little bit. So the cover crop roots are going to encourage the growth of those soil microbes that we want. You could till it in as a manure crop to add, build soil structure and add some nutrients to the soil. And that leads to improved water infiltration. And then, so like a fall cover crop could include crimson clover, annual rye, barley, mustard greens, and radish. Now, your mustard greens have a natural propensity to be a pre-emergent, a natural weed control, but you have to till that under. So you would plant those now, and like if you were going to plant your fruit trees in the spring, you'd want to get that tilled under in the rows about 6 weeks before you're ready to plant. So is usually what we recommend. I mean, you can use just regular grass. That's a cover crop. But if you want to put more nutrients in the soil, you can do these things like mustards and crimson clover that helps fix nitrogen. That just reduces your inputs over time. That's less fertilizer that you have to go to the store and buy and put down. All right, here's some pictures. And I love the red clover. I plant that all around the house. And then I won't mow until, it starts to go to seed. And I will go out there and I'll walk through the clover and I'll pick, the dried seed. I'll save it for fall planting. So, but this is not my garden by far. But you can see here where they're using the cover crops in between the rows. That also brings in pollinators. And like I said, as that dies back, you cut it back or you crimp it and lay it down and let that rot. That's good mulch and adds nutrients back to the soil. So your soil can look like this. So you want to plow down any stubble left from the field crop in late summer, incorporate that soil organic matter. You may need to soil test again. If you soil tested early in the fall and now this is spring and you're thinking about planting your blueberries or whatever, you may want to plant again if your soil test was really off, if your pH was really off and you added amendments, you need to check that again and see if you're in the right range. Then you can plant, or you may need to add more amendments and grow cover crops or something else over that area until you get the pH in the right range. Right? So plant selection, pollination, and proper planting. So fruit trees, nut trees, grapevines, they should really be purchased as bare root or containerized trees. Right now, if you look at the trees, you probably see them on sale at Lowe's. I feel like I'm repeating myself here. I've done so many talks here lately, I can't remember who I've told what. But the bare root plants, you're better off to start off with a bare root plant that is small than you are to start off with a larger tree. Because that tree may not have been pruned properly at the nursery. It may have sat on the nursery yard too long, and it had developed diseases and such like that. Did I tell you all about the orchard? It was a small orchard in town. A lady called me, come out and look at this good deal that she had gotten on apple and pear trees. Did I tell you that? No, I'm just gonna talk to another group. Okay. Anyway, she bought all these dollar piece at Lowe's or something like that, and was so proud of them. I went out there and I talked to her because I'd been out to her orchard a couple different times, and they all had fire blight. They had the apples had cedar apple rust, and my suggestion: take them back to Lowe's. Do not plant these. Now, the second thing that was going to be wrong about what she was about to do was interplanting, because she had some mature fruit trees and then these younger ones. And so you don't want to interplant young with old. So you want to start a new field with the new varieties and such. And so I told her, no, take those plants back to the garden center. They've got disease. She did not follow my advice, and she interplanted. And then it was a couple of years later, I heard from her again, and her orchard was gone. So it was, yeah. And I mean, she had a good start. She really did. She had started following the spray schedule and things like that. And then it just got to be too much because she took them off the sale rack and introduced a problem into the orchard and ended up just cutting them all down. Just I'm tired of fighting it. So what seems cheap, it is cheap. You get what you pay for. But usually I will go with companies online. We have Stark Brothers, we have Norris Nursery up in North Carolina. We have some around McMinnville, and I will put that list up on the Google Drive of recommended nurseries to get your stock from. But yeah, you want to, maybe not buy plants from Washington or Oregon, because they're living in a total different environment than what we have in Tennessee. They may still be in zone 7, but they have a more moderate climate because they're closer to the ocean, and they can grow stuff organically up there. It's awesome. When I went up to Oregon one time, I swore I was going to miss my plane and not come back. I could see the mountains out of my hotel window. It was so cool. But to look at their soil was just so awesome. And we had one lady in our study group that asked, we were at this one nursery, how deep does your soil go? And the lady that was from Oregon leading the tour, she was like, I don't understand what you're asking. She's like, how deep does your soil, when you put a shovel in? And she's like, oh, it goes all the way. And we're like, well, we're from different states. We're from Kansas, we're from Tennessee, we're from Missouri, where the shovel goes kabang back at you. She just couldn't understand the question, but it was true. I mean, you could just take your hands and dig down into the soil. I was like, I'm gonna take it home with me. So you've got to consider what we're dealing with here in Tennessee and select those varieties that are going to be resistant to diseases. Resistance does not mean immunity. Okay, they still can get these diseases if the conditions are right. So we have to be careful about that, but they do a lot of research. We come out with lists all the time. They're usually updated every couple of years. But like Dave Lockwood says, when we do research, a lot of times it's on a research farm. Okay. And sometimes they will intentionally, inject them with, or expose them to diseases and viruses and things like that, just to see what will happen. And then that's how they test to see how much pesticides you need to control a disease and things like that. So they're kind of in a controlled environment. And so that all can just go completely wild when you put it out in your landscape. Because you've got a different type of soil, you've got a different climate, different environment, especially if you're in town and it's a landscape tree, there's going to be more heat islands and things like that. So about the time that they get a variety and they're ready to recommend it, it starts having all kinds of problems when used out in the real world. So that's why it's hard to come up with these lists and be consistent. We do have some good varieties out there, but we're always constantly doing research, because what will grow in Middle Tennessee may not grow in East or West Tennessee. So we want to get small trees about 4 to 6 foot high. They're going to be whips, about a 3/8 to 5/8 inch caliper. Now, we all know to measure a tree, you go by DBH, diameter at breast height, about 4 to 5 feet. Caliper is at the bottom of the tree. So when we say 1.5 caliper, 1.5 inches caliper, we're measuring it at the base of the tree right before it flares out into the root ball. So you're going to have a very small tree when you start out. Okay. Stone fruits, typically the same size. Nut trees, they might be 6 to 8 feet just because they're fast growers. But grapevines, they're propagated as root cuttings. And about 1 year, 1-year-old field grown plants are suggested. And that's because you're gonna hack off their head and all the side branches once you plant. And I would like to add in here, because I don't think I go over strawberries. Strawberries are reproduced by tips or runners. And I don't know if you've heard or seen, it's not really been in the news, but there is a new disease going around, and we call it NEOP because it has a big long name, Neoplasmosis or something weird like that. So that is affecting the strawberry industry all up and down the East Coast. And this fungus came in about 2019. And it was bad on the East Coast. And then the hurricane winds brought it up. See, a lot of our growers that would be buying strawberries, buying from North Carolina, Georgia. So that fungus made its way up the East Coast. And it started being in all the transplants because they start out with the tips, and that's what turns into the transplants or the plugs that the strawberry growers plant. So now there's not a NEOP-free strawberry plug anywhere in the United States. We've even checked up north. There's a place in Idaho that our growers may be able to turn to next year, as long as they keep their crops protected. But we've had to go to an intense spray program. News came out right as our strawberry growers were about ready to plant. So they had plastic laid, shipments on the way, and some of them decided to turn down the shipments so they would not incorporate this new disease into their fields. Some are taking the risk and going with a high intensive spray program. So long story short, you're going to pay a pretty penny for strawberries next spring because the inputs from the farmer are going to be a lot more. So yes, ma'am.
What does that do?
It starts out as kind of a leaf spot, and then it turns into it gets into the roots, and it'll move through the whole plant really quickly. It'll kill the buds, it'll kill the blooms. It hits it in different stages, but usually right about the time that it's ready to start making the little strawberries, and the temperatures are just right, and we get a wet, warm spring rains, that's going to kick that disease in, and it can devastate your whole crop. It kills the whole plant. And then the recommendations after that are fumigation, which a lot of farmers don't want to do. But you really need to fumigate if you're doing one crop over and over again. You really need to fumigate that soil and then lay your plastic down over that. And that helps to kill out those fungal organisms. With this disease, it's very persistent in the soil, and many varieties of strawberry are susceptible to it. So what we would recommend would be deep tillage, cover cropping, keeping those fields fallow or, just cover cropped for a couple years before you go back with strawberries. So we've got one grower in town here that decided not to grow at all, but he's going into cut flowers. So right now he's planting tulips instead of strawberries. So you know, because I mean, he had started, he plowed up new fields everywhere and was within a week. And I sent the message out about this disease and he was like on the phone. What am I gonna do? I've got $8,000 and another $8,000 plus I just spent 5,700 preparing. Yeah, he was freaking out. So, and you know, I think he made a good decision, but we've got others, you know, like I said, they're just gonna go with a really intensive spray program. And try to beat it. And we're also gonna do research on 2 farms next year, so.
So for the business strawberries that are planted, like my neighbor, all of her beds around the house,
Yeah,
that's all strawberries, and it's in the same plant. Kind of the last.
she probably doesn't have it then.
So as long as it doesn't work, like, fine, you know.
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't introduce anything new.
Right, as long as she doesn't introduce any new ones in right now, she should be fine. Or if she's, you know, letting them start from the runners, which is usually what you do. Because with a strawberry, you have a mother plant. And that produces the biggest berries, and that's what you pick. And then if you're doing like the matted row or a home system rather than plasticulture, then you let those runners set down, and that makes your new mother plant for the next year. And then the mother plant dies off.
Sells and trades
Mhm.
that.
Okay. Yeah, she might just want to be careful, and watch them for any, you know, any spots, any, you know, especially when it's about time for the berries to come on, and you got the small berries, if they start looking rotted. Like I said, a lot of leaf spot, the roots look slimy, nasty. You know, have her bring it in and we'll send it off to the lab to get tested. So, yeah. So make sure you're getting healthy plants, use a reputable nursery. And, you know, some of our nurseries just kind of, you know, that disease happens. You can't help it. So, but you want to try to get as healthy a plants as possible to get you started. Fall, when you plant, typically on your bare root plants, so your trees, your fruit trees and nut trees, a fall planting about this time of the year, you're taking a risk of them getting hit by a hard freeze. We're still due for a hard freeze. We've had a couple hard frost, but it has not gotten below 32 degrees. Anything 32 degrees and below would be a hard killing freeze. And you want that with like strawberries to go into dormancy, but with new little trees, it could damage them because we'll get that freeze and then we'll get a warm up and then they'll start to grow again. And then that new growth gets frozen back, it'll get damaged. So we're gonna plant around March, okay, February, March. I would not plant a bare root tree right now. Yeah, so right now. Well, a bare root is gonna be small. If you've got container or balled and burlap, that's usually a larger tree and it's more adapted. So this is the time of year to plant trees, like shade trees and such like that. Bare root plants, you want to wait till like February, March and get them out before the end of April. Okay, I'm starting to confuse myself. Okay, so pollination requirements, essentially, we have lists where we'll say this tree pollinates that tree. Okay, you just need a tree of a different variety that blooms so that you get cross pollination. So cross pollination makes a larger and better fruit. So so you want to have a pollinizer out in the field within 100 feet of your plants. Bees are going to be the agents. They transfer the pollen. We need our insects. We need our pollinators to transfer that pollen from one tree to another. Fruit trees are not typically wind pollinated or pollinated by the wind. They need an insect. So if it's a bumblebee or a honeybee or maybe a mason orchard bee, some of our wasps, things like that, you don't want to try to kill those off, especially during the bloom period, because they're actually doing good out there. So here a little bit, going back to our biology, you do want, like I said, that cross pollination, but you want to have 2 different varieties that bloom at the same time. And so we're going to get the pollen. And the pollen is Comes from here, little bee comes to visit here, it will sit on the stand, and hopefully that thing, the pollen will go down the style and the ovary right there. You can see that little swelling, and that will develop hopefully into fruit. Okay, we're gonna go over the spray schedule here pretty soon, but one, one visit may be adequate, hopefully, but if we have rain, if we have cooler weather, we have things like that going on, pollinators are not gonna be out, and not gonna be moving. So that does kind of cause a problem in the spring with fruit development too. Okay, well, apples, blueberries, cherries, kiwis, persimmons, sunflowers, caneberries, all benefit from the cross pollination with that. 2 apple varieties or 2 pear, 2 peach, whatever, that bloom at the same time. Aggregate fruits are a little more interesting, like a raspberry or a blackberry. Each of these have to be pollinated. So bee has to visit each one of those little berry within a berry, I guess you'd say, the aggregate berries. Yeah. So many plants are self-fertile. They do pollinize themselves, but they will benefit from a cross pollination. So there's some bees on a raspberry, bumblebees. Now, I know everybody wants to protect the honeybee, but the honeybee is not a native bee. I mean, we want them for the honey, but we also want to protect the other pollinators and think about and study on what other things are pollinators so that we recognize them when we're out in the garden and we don't just go and spray them with insecticide or something. Because you start killing off the beneficials, you're going to have a lot of problems in the long run. So we like to have our bumblebees out there bumbling around, pollinating. And so they say the bees tend to move down the rows. Okay, so you want to put a pollinator within 100 feet of your other plants that need to be pollinated. So this is kind of a layout. The dwarf and semi-dwarf stock may need more colonies. So you may, if you've got a large orchard, or even if it's 10 trees in your backyard, it might be beneficial for you to have a beehive. Okay, if you got a large orchard, definitely you're going to want to keep bees, and you're going to want to encourage those mason orchard bees, which are native, and they don't sting, so that's a good thing. And encourage the bumblebees to get it. Okay. Yeah, you can have them in the city and the county. There is a permitting process within the city. Yeah, if you live within Clarksville city limits, you've got to go get a permit. And then as far as the state is concerned, you have to register your beehive with the state. So, and we have a local Montgomery County Beekeeper Association. Well, last I knew, they were meeting on the first Saturday of the month at 10 o'clock at the library. But you might want to just Google them, check their website, and make sure that's still their meeting date. But they know all about bees and making honey and all that good stuff. So usually if people have bee questions, I will defer them to the beekeepers, as they have a grant where they will help you set up your hive, and you get a mentor and everything. They give you the bee suit, and I mean, you have to put the hive together. You got to build it, put it together, and put the frames in it and all. I did it one year, and I thought I was doing really good. And we had a warm up about February, and my mentor, he called me and told me, he said, you may need to add some sugar water to your bees. They're going to be hungry. It's warm weather's bringing them out. So I went out to check the hive. There was no commotion going on at all. So I had him come over, and we pulled the top off, and the queen bee had flew the coop. We could not find the queen. So the queen left, and so the rest of them died, because their main duty in life is to take care of the queen. So so when she left, they died. So unfortunately, that was my experience with bees, and I just never went back. So But this diagram just shows you, put your different varieties in there, put your pollinizers out within 100 feet of your other plants that need pollinated. That's to ensure pollination. So to be an effective pollinizer, that variety must have a bloom period that overlaps that of the variety to be pollinated, must produce viable pollen, and be grown in close proximity to the variety you want pollinated. So insect pollinated fruit includes most all our fruits. I'm not going to read over all of those, but insects are key pollinators rather than wind or rain or something like that. So cross-pollination, again, apples, blueberries, cherries, kiwis, persimmon, caneberries require 2 or more that cross-pollinate to get a larger fruit and better tasting fruit. So self-fertile plants, which means they have both male and female parts, and they are self-fertile, but they can benefit from the bees working them, and you will get a larger fruit. And like with your caneberries or brambles, like I said, each of those little aggregate fruits have to be pollinated. And like on a strawberry, have you ever seen a strawberry, those little dots on the strawberry? That's actually the seed, and that has been pollinated by a pollinator. And so it takes a lot of work to produce a little piece of fruit. And the best time to plan for pollination is when you order your plants. We have charts available recommending varieties that will serve as pollinators for each of them. Several environmental factors that do affect pollination. When the temperatures are below 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that does reduce the bee flight and activity, and so does windy conditions. So that may be one, could be one reason if you're not seeing fruit, could be lack of pollination. A lot of times it's our late spring freezes that get them. Temperatures above 85 to 90 degrees will reduce the bee activity, and you won't get good pollination. So again, here in Tennessee, it's our fluctuations in temperature, because we could have a high of 55 one day and 85 the next day. And so that just messes with the whole system. But that's just part of climate change, I guess. And then we don't want you applying insecticides during the bloom, because that is going to harm the bees. And I think we're going to go over the spray schedule in just a few minutes. Okay. At planting, we think of this as, like we talked about planting a tree, these are going to be bare root. So once you get them in, you've ordered them probably from a company online, or you may drive to McMinnville and pick up your bare root plants. Inspect the roots, make sure they are not dried out, make sure they're not too wet, make sure that they're not kind of black looking, like I said, slimy, oozy. That means they've got a disease on. So you don't want to buy those, and you don't want to incorporate a disease into your orchard. So your trenches, or what holes that you're digging for your plants, same as shade trees, we're going to go twice, 2 to 3 times the size of the diameter, and just as deep. Well, with fruit tree, no deeper than the graft. And let me bring out the next. But it is important when you get that shipment in, make sure you put it in the refrigerator usually. And if they're dry, just kind of spritz them with a water bottle, or put a little bit of moisture in there somehow. Don't keep them over 2 weeks in the refrigerator. They need to be planted fairly soon. If they come in early and you're not ready to plant, you can either, like I said, you put them in cold storage, or you can put them outside in mulch, and just kind of lay them out and put the mulch over them and keep them watered until you're ready to plant. But try to be ready for it. Plan ahead and be ready for your shipment of plants when they come in. And don't be afraid to refuse shipment. I mean, even if that puts you back a year, it might save you a lot of money and heartache in the long run, because if you introduce a disease in that area, sometimes it doesn't just go away. It takes time for the organisms to go away. So, okay, so this is the graft union. Behind myself. So all your fruit trees, nut trees are grafted. Okay, so your rootstock is going to be of one variety. The rootstock acts to dwarf the tree, semi or dwarf, Takes those standard trees, you know, that are gonna get 35 to 40 foot tall, and it dwarfs, makes them, you know, a lot shorter, about 15 foot tall. So, you want you probably want, I know the standards are gonna be cheaper, but a semi-dwarf or a dwarf is gonna be a shorter, stockier tree in the long run. But anyway, don't bury this bracken. It's very easy to see on the tree. So, you're gonna have bare root, and so what we like to do is build up a little tunnel or a little rise in in the soil, and just kind of break those roots up and put them down over that cone. I guess would be a cone shaped bit of soil, and then you just fill back in with your parent soil. Again, we don't want to add organic matter just to one tree, because that's gonna break up your soil aggregates. They're not gonna be the same size, and we don't want that mixing. Now, you can take your parent soil, put it in a wheelbarrow, and, you know, knock up all the clumps and things like that, and add your organic matter, mix it up really well to where it's all kind of has the same size aggregates and characteristics, and then put it back in the hole. But if you just pour in a good bag of Miracle-Gro or whatever on that tree right there, it's gonna stay right there. And its roots are gonna go round and round and round until it strangles it. And another thing I would have done on this hole would be to have hit it with shovel. This is almost glazed. I mean, I would want to see that kind of broken up a little bit. So I just take my shovel and take a spade or something and make sure that's broken up. Because those roots, you know, if they hit a place that's easy, you know, they're like, "Ooh, yeah, I can grow here." But if they hit that hard clay, then they're like, "Eek, nope, not going, don't want to work for this. I've got all this good soil right here." And so that's what makes it grow around now. Kind of good, stable, strongly attached tree. So spacing on trees is very important. You want to get plenty of sun. You want to allow for the air circulation to reduce your diseases, even some insect problems. If you have a robust soil, a little extra spacing might want to be given, because those trees will grow and get big. So, excuse me, the three sizes of trees, we have the standards, semi-dwarf and dwarf. So a standard is going to be the largest tree, and it's going to get fairly big. Semi-dwarf is medium height, and dwarf is the smallest. So the standard trees are going to get 18 to 35 feet, 25 feet tall and wide, unless they are a standard peach nectarine. We don't recommend nectarine for here. They grow to about 12 to 15 feet. You have a different pruning process for the peaches and plums. Semi-dwarf trees are going to grow 12 to 15 feet in height and width, and with the exception of cherries, sweet cherries, which can get a little larger, okay? Maybe 15 to 18 feet tall and wide. So you got to remember, you know, how big the canopy is going to get and how tall that tree is going to get when you're looking at your spacing. So dwarf trees, you can plant them as close as 8 to 10 foot apart. Okay, but again, as closer you get, the more intensively managed that they have to be. So your standard apple trees are going to need about 30 to 35 foot in between trees. That's a lot of space. So then semi-dwarf about 15 foot apart, and then dwarf apples about 10 foot apart. Peach trees should be spaced about 20 foot apart. They are more prone to fungal diseases, so you want to make sure they have that good air circulation. A standard pear is going to be about 20 feet. Plums are going to have be about 15 foot apart. And sweet cherries are just marginal here. I mean, we can grow them, but either if the late spring freeze doesn't get them, then the birds get them right about the time you're ready to harvest, because they're watching them too. The birds and the raccoons and things like that. But there are nettings and coverings, things like that you can put on your cherries and blueberries, things like that the birds are getting after. Is it what? That would be a high intensity apple.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're spaced very closely, maybe 8 to 10 foot apart. It kind of looks like a espalier because they are on a trellis. And so yeah,
But you can do that here while they're blue.
You can hear me. All right, Carla, I got a question.
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, I was watching a video about some of the commercial growers in Michigan on the apple trees.
Mm-hmm.
They're growing dwarf trees, or they're growing as a column. The rows are 12 feet apart, and they plant the trees 30 inches apart, and they grow them as a column. Have you heard about that technique?
Growing just in a column, kind of like we're showing on the screen.
Yeah, is that what I can't tell on the screen?
Oh,
Column tree? Yeah, something like that.
yeah, they're growing them more upright than letting them let the canopy spread.
Okay.
Okay, now
Yeah, they're
I
like
got my
30 inches apart, the ones they grow in Michigan. The growers in
30
Michigan.
30
inches.
inches. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, they have a different climate up there, so
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
closer planting and more intensive. But yeah, because they have less stress from fungus and insects up there. Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions. Let's see. Mason orchard bees are native to Tennessee. Somebody says a broom what? And I said broom sedge. Or some people call it broom sage. Yeah, it's just kind of a weed. It's got no nutritional value. Cattle won't eat it. Even goats won't hardly even eat it. So, but it's a native grassy plant. Oh, what happened? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Thought I skipped two. Okay, watering is going to be critical because in late June, the water kind of turns off, our natural water. So once you get them planted, you may want to put a tree guard around them. We have such deer pressure around here that people will make huge fences, kind of like your tomato cages, but taller, 5 to 6 foot tall, and to protect those plants from deer and such like that. Voles with a V. Voles are more like field mice. Moles, you can tell because they you can't even hardly see their eyes. I don't know if their eyes ever open or not, but you can tell the difference between a mole and a vole. A vole will use the mole's runs to get out there, and they will feed on the roots of your plants and will actually skin the bark off and girdle a tree. A mole just kind of disrupts the surface. It may feed on grass roots, but they're not such a bother to fruit trees and such. So, but your voles can be a problem. Deer, other critters, always have a lot of pressure there. Variety. Oh, sorry.
So how long should it take that fire on the brain?
I would say it should drain probably within 8 to 12 hours. Yeah. Depends on how many holes you put in the bottom of the bucket and yeah. So you're really wanting to water, during the heat of the year, maybe twice a week. And so you'd be filling those buckets up a couple times a week. And well, pretty much year round. If we're getting good natural rain, then you're okay. But if we have a dry winter, if we go into dry months during the winter, those trees will need to be watered the first 3 years. Even in winter. Yep. When it's dry, it's dry. Like right now, we can go out there and dig in some of the areas and it's just dry as can be, hard as a rock. So cultivars, the types of fruit that you want. I do have some lists that I will post on the Google Drive, the ones that are resistant, the ones that are, dwarf, semi-dwarf, all that good stuff. But you want to look for varieties that are going to have resistance to diseases and insects. The rootstock also, like I said, controls that dwarfing. but it also may make it resistant to borers. It's apple, peach, more apple and peach. They get borers in them and they cause kind of a canker disease. They also get into cherries, and you'll see that at the base where it starts oozing sap. And even your ornamental cherries, like we looked at the park there, they had gummosis is what the disease is, and it's hard to treat without injecting. So we'll have some sprays that you only spray after you harvest, and it's to control those borers. So again, or pesticides, I know. So the varieties that you see, the varieties you see at the store are intensely managed in large orchards, and they're definitely being sprayed unless you're buying the organic kind. So we want you to choose resistant cultivars, Liberty rather than a McIntosh. Okay. Golden Delicious is a very good pollinator, but it gets every disease known to man. So sometimes people will put the Golden Delicious out there and they'll just keep it pruned back to almost a stick and just let it flower during the pollination period, and then just kind of keep it pruned back to where it doesn't get diseases. But they treat it the same as they would the tree that they want fruit from. If that makes sense. So the varieties you choose should also be winter hardy in your area. Okay, I do go into strawberries. So we have varieties for plasticulture. Most of your commercial growers of strawberries are going with plasticulture with an irrigation underneath the plastic so that they can be watered. Like right now, if people put, they're putting their strawberries out or should already have them in the ground. Got one grower I'm going to see tomorrow who hasn't planted his yet, so we'll see. But anyway, with the Chandler or the plasticulture, Chandler, Sweet Charlie, Albion, and there's more varieties out there now. But on plastic, these do the best, and this is an annual system. Once these strawberries are done, when you think about how a strawberry is, it's got that mother plant and it has the runners. There's nowhere for the runners to set down except for maybe in between the rows. So when you have an annual system, you're going to have to kill off those strawberries at the end of the system and pull up the plastic and deep till. The plastic, when you pull that plastic up, a lot of your plants will come up and that will get taken to the landfill. But a lot of those plants will end up laying on the ground. So that's the point of the deep tillage, is to bury those plants as deeply as you can. If you can, plant a cover crop in between until you're ready to plant again. Now, some people will try to carry these over. It just doesn't work well. Anthracnose, it just adds more maintenance for fungicide sprays and things like that. So a lot of your diseases do overwinter. So plasticulture system, you're better off just to kill them off, get rid of it. Don't try for 2 seasons. And then we have a matted row. So some of our older varieties, All-Star, Early Glow, Cardinal, Hone, and TriStar. Matted row is a perennial system. These are the ones where once the mother plant is done, you're going to let the runners set down, or you can help them set down. Okay, you can use clothespins or landscape pins and things like that to pin those runners down, and that's going to be your mother plant for the next year. So the mother plants, once it's done, it runs out of energy, and so that's why it puts the little babies out. And so you just set those runners down, and those runners are also referred to as tips, and that's what the transplants are grown from, is the tips. Okay, time to take a break. This is the country road that I grew up on. Yeah, got to go back there a few years back.
Yeah.
From different places, they kind of live down to eat from you. and roll it down, so that the ground level is probably as, and it was kind of like a high cover up, or it's little like slide. Do you have paper up there?
Oh, I saw this, I was like, no, I don't know.
The windows like that. To get the funny from what they're. All of them.
Everybody else has already signed up.
Very. No, they weren't very. Just still on my people. The area.
Oh, no, whatever. Okay, that's the thing.
Yeah, it was, yeah, because they put on there, they moved down. One of other things, but they, it like, you can see into the, so we should tell out. They were able to throw that. I haven't seen too many people. No, we've had some that have tried blueberries, strawberries, and real, France, and it's like an industry. So the greenhouse, we got a lot of energy coming into year round. Because we're gonna get spoiled. Yeah, I probably put their hot tub. Yeah, yeah. I know somebody did that. Or having their, those bells that are black. Yeah, compost is built for the natural heat, the more you add the organic matter in, the high tone. I'm trying to control it by opening the end to the side. I did that. You know.
Do I? No, actually, that is about 3 years ago.
So where is that at?
In Missouri.
Oh,
There is one house across the road there.
I wouldn't have thought Missouri, it does, but it.
A lot of memories in that picture.
Yeah.
Where I
The
met the
road
school
you just
bus.
wanna go down, you know?
Yep, yep, the people that have the house now, I'm glad they kept it looking good and take care of the land and stuff, because we only had about like 5 acres. But we could roam the whole woods around everywhere. Couple fishing ponds out back in the pasture.
I kinda hate in a way, there's not many places where kids can do that anymore.
No, you
Just
can't.
turn them loose and just let them go.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, even where I'm at in Palmyra, can't let them out
No, same
without
thing.
supervision.
There we are too, same.
Can't ride your bike up and down the roads. Of course, I went down that road many, many times. I had to have a 10 speed.
I mean, we were like feral kids growing up. I mean, they would turn us loose and we'd show back up. But when the street lights
Mhm.
came out, and you knew you had to get, we didn't think necessarily come in the house. We had to be close by,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's even inside of the house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now it's like,
yeah.
don't want your kids out of your.
Well, at the time, when I lived out here in this area, I mean, it was 10 miles to town and it was 3 miles either way to another person. We neighbors,
Wow.
long ways away. Yeah,
Probably been asked already, but where is that?
in Missouri,
Yeah, I have to.
Crawford County. Out-
It is, they should look at the roads where to go down and just see what's down there, you know?
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Another interesting thing, I think that what you're seeing there is that shed that's in the back. Now, when I was growing up, we called it chicken house. The front part was where my dad had his woodworking stuff, and we had a couple extra freezers, refrigerators out there. And then the back half of it was where the chickens were kept. But it was, goes back to the 1900s. I'm not sure exactly when the house was built. Like the 1920s, 1930s, it was a speakeasy. Where we had the chicken house was a speakeasy.
Oh, that's funny.
And so there were tales of dances and parties that went on in that building.
There were a few murderers.
And probably could have been, I mean, our basement was very crude. We did have to run to the basement one time when I was a kid because of a tornado. And that was not fun. There's a big cherry tree that was out in the front yard, hit the house. There was a front porch and then bedrooms, and this big cherry tree landed on 2 oak trees that are still there. It caught it. Me and my sister were down in the basement. If that tree would have come down, it would have took the whole house down on top of us. But a tree did fall over the opening to the cellar or the basement. Yeah, we had a lid on it, whatever you call it, where you pulled it down, you fastened it from the inside.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we couldn't get out. So we had to wait until mom and dad were able to come through. I guess I was about maybe 10, 11, and my sister would have been about 14. But yeah, I remember having to go grab her because she was busy doing hair and had the hair dryer on. And I was in the bathtub and I seen the tornado coming up over the hill. It was black, you know, and I'm like, we gotta go to the basement. We gotta run out of the house to go to the basement. And she was like yelling at me. And I just grabbed her by the arm and we went to the door and there was stuff flying by us. Went around the house, the antenna fell by us, and we got to where we could get the lid up and get down the stairs into the basement and get the house. Well, you had to pull it down. And there was a latch down there to hook it. And then, of course, after the storm went past, there was another tree over that where we could not get out. But when we finally got out and we seen that huge, it was a black cherry tree, and it was just laying over the house. If it hadn't caught on those 2 oak trees,
Oh.
may not have been here to tell the tale. But, okay, Cherry Marsh. Anyone here on Zoom live near Ashland Road, near Rotary Park, or cars in the shop, new to the city, looking for a ride next week? Okay. I'm not sure. Let me save that. Anybody in here live?
Yeah.
Okay, Josh says he lives near Ashland City Road. I can get you 2 connected somehow. Do you want do you want to come in and put your phone number in for her or okay? 141449. Okay, you see that in the chat? Okay, Josh, for you, her number, do you want her number? Okay. 207 418 8810. All right, we'll get you to, yeah, okay. Okay. And y'all on Zoom, let me know what you're gonna bring next week. For those of you who came in a couple minutes late, we're gonna have potluck next Tuesday night, instead of wait until the
Next Tuesday.
Yeah. yeah, we'll be thinking fall foods, comfort food. So we had a list going
Yeah, it's right
around.
here. We're
Oh, okay.
studying it.
Oh,
We're
okay,
trying to
okay.
decide what to, yeah, what we should add to
Okay,
this.
all right, cool. Okay. Hmm. Oh, where'd you go? Okay. I'll make sure the list gets down to the guy that sits down there. Okay, let's talk about pruning. Okay, we're gonna start out with apple trees. Apple and pear, will both be pruned to a central leader system, whereas your stone fruits, we're gonna talk more about a base system. So, when you get your trees, I don't know, it says semi-dwarf, but, any apple tree or any pear tree is gonna need to be pruned before planting. So you may get a twig in the mail that looks kind of like this. Okay, the way I was taught to do this the first year is you take off about 1/3 and you take off all these lateral branches. And then the second year, you would start to space those lateral branches to where they're gonna be about 12 inches apart as the tree shoots. Okay, and so that's very important with pears because the pears grow with a narrow, what we call a narrow crotch angle. Okay, so if you look at Japan and if you think about our thumbs is a limb of a tree. Okay, so with pears and maples and things like that, they have a narrow crotch angle, which when you get weight on it, it just pulls and it'll pull the bark off when it falls, you know, if you have a freeze or whatever wind. And so you want a better angle, kind of like a 45-degree angle. And when you're trimming, you also, I use my thumb for everything. When you prune a tree, you think about your thumb knuckle. Okay, so you're gonna prune right outside the thumb knuckle, which is the branch bark ridge. I think Katie kind of went over that night. So you wouldn't cut if you had to cut your thumb off, you would not cut it back here, that would be a flush. Okay, you would cut it here at the thumb knuckle, so you're at the branch bark ridge. But, okay, and you're manipulating your apple and your pear trees, and you want to have that 45-degree angle on the stems that you're leaving to be your fruiting branches. So here we go. Here's the one. Now this is the way David Lockwood, who is our fruit and tree fruit specialist, retired now. But he will take it and cut off 1/3 and all the branches. Okay. Next time you prune, you're gonna head that tree again, and you might leave the first lateral branches there that kind of form a whorl. And then the third year, you're gonna have established, you know, layers of maybe, I think 18 to 24 inches, a little bit wide. So realistically thinking maybe about 12 inches in between branches. And it's kind of in a whorl. So these are your scaffold branches when you're producing what's gonna be your fruit producing branches. And you kind of want them to lay like this. You want them to hang. You don't want branches that are sticking straight up. If you have suckers or water sprouts that are coming off, you want to cut those off. And so leave those branches kind of grow like this. And sometimes you will have to do some summer tipping. Okay, once they get past that third year, into the fourth and fifth year, you're gonna want to start to harvest. But up to this point, you're gonna pull the blooms off. Okay, you letting that tree establish and get a good root system set down. So you want to pull off the blooms, and that goes for blueberries, and raspberries, blackberries too. So anyway, you want that kind of a cone, Christmas triangle like Christmas tree shape on it. And this allows the light to penetrate and the wind to blow through the tree. Because with a pear, like I said, it's got those narrow crotch angles and the wind hits it and it breaks like that. And so if you have it opened up a little bit, that wind can go through and it has less pressure and it will bend and wave, but it won't break. So if that makes sense. Okay, like I said, leave one trunk for the central leader, remove any branches with crotch angles less than 60 degrees, remove all branches directly across from each other on the leader, or if they're rubbing against each other, crisscrossing, things like that, those are the ones that you're gonna remove first. And you want those lateral branches to be uniform around the tree. So here's, after our vegetative growth has reached about 3 to 4 inches in leaf, then you do your summer pruning. And again, you're gonna chip that top off. And I think that they've left a little bit of a big stub on there. You don't want to get too close because you're gonna make that, if you get too close to that bud, then it's gonna be weakly attached and tend to just fall off. So you wanna be close to the bud, but not right on, okay? And, so you're gonna take that top off and you're gonna train it. You're gonna have, how to stake it up, a fence post, bell post, something you're gonna tie it to for the first couple of years. And then you want to remove all the competing shoots about 4 inches below. And, that should be the last time that you have to do, take its head off. Probably take its head off about twice. And when you take off that apical dominance, it's going to encourage that tree to grow out, wider, the canopy to grow wider. So after your first season, second season, you let those start choosing your branches you want to keep, but you're gonna kind of tip them and remove anything that looks diseased, crisscross. If it has a codominant stem, which means if there's 2 stems coming up, that you need to take off one of those stems right at planting. Go ahead and burn that off. So if you get a leader like this, again, you're gonna take off the one that looks, here they use different fingers. Anyway, I got this one, okay? So we have that central leader. So again, you're gonna summer prune and train, and then all through the month of July, you might want to remove the growth. If the tree is in fruiting, time of fruiting, sometimes you have to remove some of that growth and remove the fruit. Now, Hebron, who taught our soils class, he has an orchard, and about June, mid-June or late June, he will literally go through his trees with a baseball bat and he'll just whack the limbs and have the excess fruit fall to the ground. And that way, the ones that are left on the tree are bigger, firmer, better fruit. Okay, so a tree will naturally have a June drop, and it just drops what it can't support. Sometimes it doesn't drop all that it can support, so it needs a little help. So you can go through like with a baseball bat or stick or something and knock them off. If it's a smaller tree, you can just pitch them. So like if you have a cluster of like 5 blooms that's growing into little fruit on one branch, you're gonna take that down to 1. You really want just one big fruit there. So and then as the tree grows, again, it takes annual pruning. So we don't want these coming straight up, or we take those off. There's another one, straight up. You have to tip the top so you can keep it within your reach and harvestable height too. So really, we are manipulating the growth of these trees. Now, there are stone fruits, peach. I'm gonna mark off nectarine because you can't, unless you have, like a kind of protected growing area. The nectarines just don't do good. They tend to bloom out too early, get hit by the freeze, and then they get all kinds of disease. So stick with peaches. You want the peaches varieties that bloom later in the spring because they get tricked again by our fluctuating temperatures. If they put off blooms early in spring and those get killed by a frost, then that's your fruit for the year. Okay. Sometimes we say that's natural thinning. But if you lose all of them, then that's all your fruit. But that does not mean that you should stop managing your trees for the year. You still want to spray for diseases, you want to prune and things like that and keep managing the tree. So, when you get your peach tree and if it has a central leader and it has some branches coming off to the side, you're going to take off that central leader and you're going to keep lateral branching coming around like a base. So you want the middle to be empty, basically. And then as the season goes on, you're going to prune off anything that tends to grow towards the middle of the tree. Okay? So you want it to kind of grow outward. And then summer pinching, you may need to do that too, just to control the weight and make sure that the limbs aren't breaking off. So here we've got a well-branched peach tree and they're getting ready to take its head off, basically. And this is, this is where I tell the homeowner to turn around. And chop sides and say, turn around, look here. And run, because some of them want to kill him. But yeah, you're just cutting out that central leader and you're keeping these lateral branches around the tree. And again, when you look down on the tree, you're gonna see that kind of looks like spokes on a wheel. So it's kind of hard to do that after you've grown that tree for a couple of years, but you know. Something that has to be done. Okay. Blueberries. Does anybody have any questions about the pruning on fruit? Any of the peach, apple, and pear? Anything?
Pears.
Pears.
Yeah, well, mine are stubborn. They want to go vertically no matter what I do.
Yep, they do. Yeah, you can prune them to a central leader, and any of them that have the narrow crotch angles, you probably couldn't see, but I used my hand as an example. Can you see that, Ross?
Yeah.
All right, you're gonna prune these out to where you're gonna thin them and try to open up that pear tree. Okay. So that, because if it gets weight on this one that has a narrow crotch angle, you know, that's gonna come down, it's gonna break, and it's gonna tear the bark. So you just want to continually prune it to thin it out, anything straight up. But apple and pear are pretty bad about water sprouts and suckering. So you just have to stay on them.
I do have a question about the apple trees.
Okay.
So I bought 2 apple trees from a nursery, and I planted them, at the time that was recommended. We did everything that the apple tree person was talking about, or the tree lady was talking about. And we did the sand, we did the soil testing, we did the mulch, and we did like the depth and the circumference. And I noticed that it had what looked like some rust on some of the leaves, but the leaves are kind of coming off now. So is it kind of like a gone thing, or is there anything else we need to do?
Yeah, I would just do a good cleanup, because you probably are seeing cedar apple rust
Okay.
on those leaves. And so you want to do a good cleanup this fall, bag up those leaves, burn them, don't compost them, or that can, it stays in there. The disease organism will stay in the leaf or the litter. So just do a good cleanup, and then make sure that you've soil tested and have our spray schedule. And like I said, I'm going to post that, and I'm going to post the organic spray schedule also.
Okay.
But dormant oils are most important. I think we're going to go over that here in just a minute, though. So.
One last question.
Okay.
Can I use diatomaceous earth to help with pests and things?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will help with some. I mean,
Okay.
they might keep things from crawling up the tree, but
yeah.
Diatomaceous earth works really good for like snails and slugs and soft-bodied insects. So you're not really gonna put it all over your fruit tree.
Okay.
Because you don't want to breathe that stuff in, because it's diatoms. It can be very irritating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so we have rabbit eye versus high bush. It's kind of like Mitchell said last week on the turf grass. We can grow warm season grasses and cool season grasses, but neither one of them grows really well. So sometimes it's just trial and error, based on how your land faces, your site, things like that. So rabbit eye tend to be not as sensitive to soil types. And there are some varieties of blueberries that have come out, like I think Pink Lemonade, where they don't require an acidic soil. So there are some newer varieties, and they are grafted so that they don't have to rely on an acidic soil. So rabbit eye, more heat tolerant, drought tolerant. They're also deeper rooted, because your blueberries tend to be shallow rooted. And then we have the other variety is high bush. It's considered a northern plant, but there are northern high bush and rabbit eye that have specific varieties here for Tennessee. And you usually want to do a combination to kind of draw out your harvest season. So, you may want everything to come in harvest at one time, but you may want a couple different flushes. So if you pick varieties that will be ready, mid-June, late June, the end of June, going into July, you can carry out your harvest season a little bit. So, all right, some of our varieties that we recommend on the blueberry, your rabbit eye would be bright blue, bluebell, climax, garden blue, tiff blue, and there's probably more varieties than this. All do benefit from cross-pollination, as we said earlier, so you'll want to make sure that you use a couple different varieties. And then on our high bush, we have Duke, Blue Crop, Berkeley, Blue Ray, and Patriot. So again, you want to choose those varieties meant for our area. And okay, so blueberry production timeline, I could really apply this to any fruit. Pre-plant site preparation, that's going to be that first year. Okay, so you're basically negative year one. This is where you're preparing your ground and you're getting ready, you're selecting out the right varieties, getting ready to plant. The first year, first 2 years at least, you're going to defruit. So you're going to pull all your blooms off and let them work on establishing that root system. And then the third year, you should get your first crop with the rabbit eye, maybe fourth year going with the high bush. Because they are shallow rooted and they like a well-drained soil, you might consider raised beds for blueberries. Especially if you're just doing a few at your home, you can control that environment a little bit better. Make sure that you've got the acidic soil, or select those like I think it's called Pink Lemonade was the one variety that can grow in alkaline soils. But they do like a lot of organic matter, so you're probably going to have to add some compost. And then I hate doing math, but we have to work on it it's based on your pH, how much elemental sulfur that you would need to bring the pH down. So it can wait, you may have to wait 6 months, you may have to wait a year, depending on how off target that you are. And also think about the money that it's costing you to bring that soil down to that level. So you got to make a choice. Would this be a better area just to grow regular fruit trees? Maybe look at another area. And if you have, like I said, if you have that broom sedge growing, that can be an acidic soil because that's the environment they like to grow in. So kind of look at your areas and what you might want to plant where. Okay, fruit tree management. This is what I was going to get into. I don't really want to go into that. Okay. Apple and pear diseases. We have some powdery mildew going on here. Then we have your cedar apple rust, or no, wait a minute, that's apple scab. Down at the bottom is cedar apple rust, and then over here on the right side would be your fire blight. Okay, all of these. Well, the fire blight is hard to control. Basically, with your fire blight, you're going to see flagging on the tree. It will just look brown, kind of curled, like a shepherd's crook. This is what we look for as the characteristic sign. Once the plant has that in it, it is a bacterial disease, and you can control it by spraying during the bloom period with a product called streptomycin, which is just an antibiotic. Okay, but you have to spray it at specific times while that tree is blooming. Then after that, you can go into pruning, but everywhere that you see a canker, you have to go 8 to 10 inches beyond that canker to remove it. Try to, and as you cut it, you will see it in the center. It'll kind of be brown. You remember how you've seen that brown? Okay, it'll be similar to what we saw when we did our pruning demonstration. It'll be brown in the center. If you still see brown, you may have to go back a little bit farther, a little bit back further until the tree's gone and it's not worth it. Okay, but you have to disinfect your pruning shears in between cuts. So you might have a couple different pairs of loppers or pruners. You've got bleach and bleach water, or use your spray disinfectant and kind of wipe them off with a clean cloth. But we can be one of the main spreaders of disease, but our insects also spread it from tree to tree. So apple and pear are both very susceptible to the fire blight. Now,
Carla,
yep.
I have a question. When you looked at my pictures, did you see that it didn't look it like it looked lighter, maybe like the leaves were changing, but I can't really
Hmm.
tell. I sent that to you.
I will have to look back at them. To be honest with you, I remember you sending those. I'll have to look back at your pictures.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. You had that baby yet? We're all wondering.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Almost. It's literally time's ticking.
Time's ticking. All right. Well, we were
Yep,
talking
real
about you
soon.
earlier, wondering if you were okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Now the cedar apple rust, you do have two hosts. You have this ugly thing that grows on like juniper trees. Okay. And usually at this time of year, it won't be open and look like this. It'll be kind of a brain looking thing, a doll, and it's about this big around, or they can be bigger. But this is the fruiting structure. When we get a warm rain in the spring, then these will start to let out the spores. So when you see these on your cedar trees, you know to spray your apple and pear. Okay, because then those spores move on to the apple leaf. And if you turn this upside down, there's these cool little things called teliospores. You look at them with a magnifier, you can actually see the spore that's causing the damage here. And the rust, those teliospores will, you can wipe off. You can see rust on it. So that's one way to distinguish cedar apple rust from apple scab. Because they can look simple when you're out in the field and you're just looking at this stuff. That one will not rub off. It's just a fungal root spot, apple scab. But this one, you kind of rubbed off. And they can have both on it at the same time. Especially if they're older trees and they haven't been taken care of. It can be a nightmare. So, okay.
For apple scab, is that one something you have to cut back like all those inches? Like the tree's not going to be able to save, or it's
No, it can usually
correctable?
be treated with fungal treatments. Just fungal sprays, fungicide sprays.
Okay, is there something
And
like
also,
organic
I mean, if you're
fungicide?
looking at cultural organic, there are organic approved sprays, but also thinning out that tree, doing your pruning on a regular basis to allow that air circulation is going to decrease the apple scab. And
Okay,
the powdery mildew too. Okay.
I think my tree does have it, but you'll see whenever I look at it, I'm like comparing, and I was like, it might have it, so I may need some fungal treatment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. The powdery mildew, it has the white mycelium on the leaves. You can see it very easily. You can wipe it off. The airborne spores usually come in when temperatures are about anywhere from 60 to 90 degrees. So we're well into the growing season at that time. If you were to put it under the microscope, again, you're going to see these little spores, and you can see how they're kind of notched, as you say. And you can recognize them by putting them under the microscope, make a slide out of them and looking at them. But you can pretty much see just with the naked eye what powdery mildew looks like. That is the white mycelium. Cool nighttime temperatures, high humidity,
My
rain.
trees have scab and rust.
Okay, they do. Okay. Yeah, if you're not spraying them, they can have both. Yeah. Now, even if you do spray them, you're just preventing. The fungicides are a preventative. That's why you want to start early in the season and then move on. But I think we're going to go through the spray schedule in just a minute, so I don't want to get ahead of myself too much. Okay, so powdery mildew, that's going to affect your photosynthesis. It can happen during the bloom period if the temperatures are right. And maybe we're having storms again, like we talked earlier about the strawberry disease, powdery mildew, downy mildew comes from the south. It'll come from Florida. It'll come from Cuba and the islands, and the hurricane winds or other winds just bring it up to us. So, when we have storms going on down south, we're going to look for problems up here in our orchards and vineyards and such like that. So it can even be on the fruit. Okay, it just causes this, just kind of streaking, marks on there. But what you're gonna do is, okay. Skip on forward, so we got a visual here. So when you look at this picture, you'll see the 1, 2, and 3, we have dormant, silver tip, green tip. 4, 5, 6, we have 1/2 inch green, then tight cluster and pink. Okay, it's about to go into full bloom. Okay, so 7 is bloom, petal fall, fruit set. The first 3 sprays are going to be with dormant oil or horticulture oil. So this would be like February, March, when the tree is in dormancy. You're going to spray them with just a horticulture oil that helps control some of the fungal diseases and soft-bodied insects. It literally suffocates like scale or aphids or things like that that might try to pop up. Then when you go through our spray guide, you're going to see it will say 1/2 inch green, like I said, or tight cluster and pink. At each of those stages, you're spraying with a fungicide. Okay, like Captan is one of the most popular ones. You can use copper sulfate, is organically approved. It's a little bit harsher, and you've got to watch your heat during those times. So at each of those times, and depending on the weather, they could be 2 to 3 days apart. So your critical sprays in the spring are going to be 4, 5, and 6, and 7. And then as the petals start to drop, then you can add an insecticide, a miticide into your spray combination. And once the fruit is set, then we go into what is called cover sprays. And then basically you're spraying every 7 to 14 days with a mix of a fungicide, insecticide, miticide. Okay, so yeah, it can be a lot of work. That's why I buy my fruit. But those, I mean, I'll have this guide online. It's got these pictures in it. But so now, you know, when you go read through that guide, it has a little chart on it. When it says, you know, tight cluster, you can look back and say, hey, that's what it means by tight cluster number 5. Okay. And take it out to the field with you and look at your trees and learn these things. And that way, pretty soon you'll be able you'll know when to spray. But like I said, at this 4, 5, and 6 stage, you're watching your tree, you're determining your spray by the advancement of the bloom or development of the bloom itself. Does that make sense? Or that confusing? Okay, but just remember petal fall, you wait until petal fall to add any insecticide into your mix. Okay. All right, rust diseases, they do cause these pustules. They're similar in appearance to leaf spot, but if you look on the underside of the leaf, you'll actually see the raised area, and that is actually the organism, the fungal organism that's causing the disease. Yes.
Is this okay with
No, this would be different. There are a lot of different rusts out there. There's a daylily rust, there's a lyrope rust, and things like that that are specific to a specific plant. So it's fungus, but it's a different organism based on the plant that it attacks. So key pests or key plants have key pests with them. Okay, your spores can be brown, reddish brown, orange, or yellow. And usually, like we talked about with the cedar apple rust, they need another host. So rust will be a host on one plant and then go back to the other. So it's a cycle every year. So your twigs, your branches, the fruit can also be affected by rust diseases. And there's a better picture of the cedar apple rust. Like right now, this is what you're gonna see on your cedar trees. You can try to cut those out. But I mean, it's time consuming and it's hard to do. There's nothing you can spray on the juniper or the red cedar to get rid of those galls. The only way you can get rid of them is just cut them up, cut them off, bag them up, put them in a fire or send them to the landfill. But then once they start to open here, that's when they're sporulating, and that's when you know to spray your apple trees. All right. Then there is a hawthorn rust. So pears are susceptible to a quince rust and a hawthorn rust, but not cedar apple rust. So it's all kind of similar things. Here's some of the first symptoms of your cedar apple rust. You'll start seeing these yellow, orangey colored spores. Definitely want to be spraying a fungicide at this time to keep it from spreading to the new growth. And remember, our fungicides are preventative, they're not curative. Ready? Here's another one. Okay. Again, delayed dormant, that when the buds start to swell, we think back to our pictures, you're going to use a dormant oil or horticulture oil. And pink, well, there we go. Okay, so again, here's on our apple, the dormant, silver tip, green tip, all that. Okay, like I said, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are going to be critical fungicide sprays. Then add in that insecticide at petal fall and fruit set, and then you're into cover sprays. Here's that fire blight again. A lot of our fire blight comes from the ornamental pear. Bradford pear, Cleveland pears, they all are susceptible to it, and that can spread to your orchard type trees. So same treatment, whether it's ornamental or an edible type tree, tends to hit apple and pear. I see it more in pear, really, unless you have susceptible older apple trees. So the affected leaves are going to remain attached, and then you have that shepherd's crook, and you need to look for the cankers on the stem to do your pruning. Okay. Not really. Streptomycin, you don't want to spray. It's just like yourself taking antibiotics too much. If you don't need it, don't take them. Because it's a bacterial disease, but it can become immune to the streptomycin. So I can remember streptomycin being being given streptomycin when I was a kid, for throat infections or whatever. I don't even see streptomycin being prescribed anymore. So I don't know what the deal is there, but that is what you would use, and it can be an expensive venture to use that. So yeah. Okay, so fire blight, they get on a number of trees, the Bradford pear, crabapple, flowering almond. Of course, we don't have to worry about that here. Plum, cherry, hawthorn, serviceberry, photinia, flowering quince, cotoneaster, pyracantha, rose, and spirea. So you can see it has a lot of host. And here's a good shepherd's crook here. Usually at the tip, it just looks burnt. And then if you look closer on the stem, there's that canker, and there's another. Okay, so you would just start backing up until you're probably back to the main trunk and just take off that whole limb. But again, it's hard to control. It really is hard to control. It's if you have it really bad and you're dedicated to keeping those trees, it's going to be spraying with that streptomycin during the bloom period, and then copper sulfate sprays or other fungicidal sprays, and pruning throughout the season. Very hard to control. So I just went over that. It's bacterial disease, very destructive. You want to avoid pruning during the blossoming period and such like that. Yeah, we talked about all that. Okay, there's another good picture. You don't want to see that in your orchard. Yeah. Those trees, if that was mine, they'd be on their way out. One final cut at ground level. And it could be in stages. This is like during the bloom time. You can tell that the plant has just completed blooming. But I would prune back to the new growth and see if you see that brown spot in the center. If you're still seeing that in the center, then you need to go back even further. Just remember, sanitize your pruners in between cuts. And then there's some more of the cankers, the leaf stage, and there's the browning that you're going to be looking for. but the leaves can kind of have, it follows the vein on the plant. So, dormant oil plus copper is gonna be one spray that you can use. And then bloom, streptomycin, you have to begin at early bloom, repeat at 3 to 5 day intervals. And then stop your sprays at, when the petals start to drop. Okay. So we've seen this. Some of the insects that get on our trees. Am I anyway?
No.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. We have plenty of insects out there. Okay. Flat-headed apple borer, in the landscape, it can get on other trees besides the apple trees. Any trees that get stressed, like in the landscape environment, your city trees, street trees, stuff like that, are very susceptible to different borers, but apple tree borer can do damage on trees other than apples. And so you're gonna look for, they call it flat-headed borer because it's got this flat head right here. And then this is the insect, okay? This insect is gonna lay an egg, so this is its larvae. And that larvae goes through, it pupates, and then it will come out. So once you see the holes, you look at these D-shaped holes, the insect has been there inside the tree feeding for a season. Okay, so you may not even know they're there until they come out. And you see these V-shaped holes, and you'll also see sawdust around the base, usually sawdust, because they eat their way out. So you saw that there. So, and there's just more. You can see this is how they killed the trees. There's one with sawdust in it. He's munching his way out. And he made himself over there. That's probably where you broke out. So it's a beetle that starts it all, but the larvae actually do the damage and can be very destructive or can kill your trees. So, yeah, it's with edible plants, it's kind of hard to control these spores. You can do, just a canopy spray, scaffold sprays, using your dormant oil, and then you can add in a permethrin, or I can't even pronounce that other one. You're using an insecticide for the apple tree borer. And typically these are put on at the end of the season after you have harvested everything. So. You're not harvesting, but you're still spraying. Yeah. Mhm. Well, the sprays are important, even if you're not harvesting.
The timeline.
The timeline for the sprays, yes, yeah. We're not gonna go with the history. Okay, stone fruits, or peaches and such. There we go. Brown rotted peach is one of our most common ones. Can be prevented through fungicide sprays during that bloom period. The infected flowers, they'll start to wilt and turn brown, get soft very quickly. But they have been pollinated, so they're more likely going to turn into fruit, but that fruit is infected already too. So then it's going to go on and you're going to start seeing these soft spots and some of that kind of shot hole or bullseye look to it. It can, and the growth you see on the outside, that's actually the fungal organism. Yeah, that's kind of gross. So you want to remove all this. And at this point, we call them mummified fruits. Okay. So if they haven't been sprayed, you want to make sure you remove all those mummified fruits and, like I said, either burn them, destroy them somehow. Don't compost them. So again, we're going to spray during our bloom time with the fungicide. And then, bloom, pre-harvest. There's also what we call a pre-harvest interval on these insecticides or fungicides. So it will tell you how many days you have to wait to harvest. You know, if your last spray, you might have 7 to 10 days. You gotta wait until harvest, so. Prevention, collect and remove the diseased fruit and get rid of it. Just do a good orchard cleanup at the end of the season. And here we go, again, with your pictures, what your tree looks like when it's dormant. That buds are starting to swell. You can kind of see a little pink, 1/4 inch green, first pink, first bloom, full bloom, petal fall, and then shuck split. So again, up until full bloom, you're gonna be spraying with fungicide. At petal fall, shuck split, you're gonna be adding that insecticide in, because that is the time that the little critter that lays the egg, it's not a wasp, it's a moth, lays the egg into the flower, and so that's when you want the insecticide in there. So it knows when to get in the plant, so. Okay, more insects. Okay, a peach tree borer is actually a clearing moth. It kind of looks like a wasp there. But they are those lay the eggs on the tree, and then you get the larvae coming out again, and it's very destructive, and you get all this gummosis as the tree is trying to protect itself, so it starts oozing sap. And that sap just gets on the side of the trees and such. So, again, you're gonna treat
Clear when it starts.
it
That's
can
what
be
mine
clear when it
says.
starts, but it usually turns kind of an amber color. Well, I think it depends on how much rain we've had. I mean, I've been under a maple tree before that was dripping just white sap, sticky sap all over me. It was another one of those weird home visits. The lady was like, my maple tree is raining. And I'm like, what? It's not raining. No, my tree is raining. So I went over and seen it, and surely enough, it was the sap coming down out of the maple tree. We'd had so much rain that spring. So, okay, so peach tree borer, you're gonna treat in May through mid-June with the trunk spray. With your insecticides, it has to be on the trunk and on the scaffold branches. The borer can get on laurel, which is an ornamental shrub. So they can get it too. Just always look kind of, pointer won't show up there. You just look at the base, and you see, this dead spot, you're gonna start following the dead back to the trunk, and you're gonna look for holes. You see those holes in there? With the laurel, I would probably just pull it out and get rid of it, because it's kind of one of those trouble plants anyway. And I think we learned a lesson in 2023, that cold killed all the laurels, and where it was borderline to survive in our climate anyway, and that freeze just killed them off. You know, that was one of the main trees that killed off completely. So I was so glad to get rid of all those in front of the office. And now in a couple of weeks, we are gonna have a new landscape out there, waiting for my trees to come in. Yep. Okay, so there's your little board. I mean, it kind of looks like a grub that we come up from the ground. But they are laid by a moth or wasp, and then the little grub-like thing causes all the damage. And there's kind of your frass that you will see on the trees. And so the further advanced it gets, the harder it is to control. You know, it will cause these growths. I mean, that almost looks like a burl. Have you ever seen a burl on a tree? It kind of looks like that, but it won't really turn into a burl. And eventually it's just gonna, you see how fat it is up top, it's skinny on the bottom? And there's cracking going on right here. And that tree was planted too deep. You can see how it looks like it's going straight to the ground like a telephone pole. Okay, that's probably added to the damage. Getting stressed, getting the burl, having the disease. So, quickly go through this. So you're gonna do, again, this is in the schedule that I'm gonna put online for you, but specific times that you want to spray according to the growth of the buds and such. So, okay. Oh, I think that's it. Oh, yep, that didn't mean to close completely, but yeah, that's it. All right, let me check the chat. Okay, how can you tell which branches are the central leader? You just really, on your apple and pear or on your shade tree, you just select that best, strongest branch that is a central, like I said, a central leader. It's gonna be growing pretty much straight up. And then you're gonna let your branches come out on the side. We talked about with the peach trees, it does not have a central leader, so it's gonna have kind of a vase shape where you've taken that central leader out and you have more branching out to the side. So, and somebody made a statement, I use diatomaceous earth all through my raised garden beds. I like to use it too. I've also found that it's good to use around my pool because I had slugs and stuff like creeping towards my pool. And so I started sprinkling a little bit around the edges of the pool, to kind of help. I didn't want to spray, so. All right, do we have any more questions? I know
Yes,
it's a lot of information to throw at you, but I will put the guides, this presentation up on the Google Drive and everything. And then if you have questions, you can always just call me, send me pictures, you know. So, all right. Okay, thank you. We will see you all next week and we will have a potluck.
have a good night.
I got the list. Oh, we're doing a potluck. All right, let me.